G'day, it's Hillboy from LastXplorer, and this is the first episode of In the Shed. We're the show that takes a look at what goes on behind the trips. We've got some industry insiders, we've got some product reviews, and we've got some tips and tricks on some of the stuff we've learned along the way. So kick back, relax, and enjoy the first episode of In the Shed. Right, so here we go, first segment. Thanks to our gear sponsors 23Zero, we had some awesome kit to test out in the Victorian high country. So we chucked Hawkey in the swag for a week, and this is what he had to say about it.
So folks, I've been sleeping in this swag for a week, so it's time to have a talk about how it's handled everything. There's been really icy cold nights, and I've been really warm. It's rained while I've been in the swag, and once I put that flap down, I was totally dry, and I didn't season the swag beforehand, so that's really good. It's got a nice canvas bag, and I've had 3 times the price swags which didn't come with a bag, so for me that's a huge bonus. And in terms of the quality of it, the canvas, the base, the mattress, everything's pretty spot on, to be honest. I'm as happy as I am with my other swags, which are similar design, as I am with this. This is great. I slept on rocky ground, and I was actually a lot more comfortable than I thought I would be, and it's got great ventilation. So I live in Darwin at the moment, so up there it's not about keeping warm, it's about keeping airflow, otherwise you get way too uncomfortable. This will do it. This has got the ventilation, so I would take this, especially in the territory, I would take this to the snow. It's an all-season swag, and that's a big deal for me if I'm spending my money on a swag. So after a week I'm happy. I slept well. Woke up every morning comfortable. So I'd put this in the mix if you're looking for a swag. Compare it with other things out there, but definitely this is a contender for me as a good all-round swag.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Hawkey. These 23Zero swags really are a great bit of kit. And to celebrate our launch, we've got one of the Swag King 1100 wide swags to give away, as well as an 8,000 kilo snatch strap and a couple of D-shackles as well. So jump online, go to the web page, enter your details, and best of luck. Right, so our next segment is all about trip planning and what we do before we head off on a trip. So hopefully there's a couple of little bits of information in there that are going to help you out on your next trip. So Andy, take it away.
Okay, so when we're planning our trips, one of the big things I do when I'm working through it is once I've got the initial sort of route worked out, I then have to look at where do we need permits for, or if we need permits, because obviously with filming, sometimes we need to look at permits, or if we're passing through Aboriginal lands, you often have to get a permit to pass through those lands. The next thing I look at is, on that route that we've picked, how far away am I from fuel stops? Have we got enough range in the vehicles? Do we have to carry extra fuel? Then that kind of leads into provisions as to whether we need to get extra food, extra food, extra water, etc., around that sort of area. And then all of that kind of goes into forming like a big picture. Then I can work out my maps. So from getting the route sorted out, finalised, we then need to look at permits and apply for permits through the various parks authorities or Aboriginal land councils, etc. For the high country trip, it was through Parks Victoria. They were really helpful, and that helped us get a lot of the trip, finalise the routes. They gave us some advice on some of the areas we were travelling through as well, and who to speak to, etc., which was really good. And then obviously we knew roughly where the fuel stops were going to be as well. If you're travelling through an outback trip, fuel can become quite a big issue as well, because then we're looking at different options and different distances, etc., that are involved. Another thing that we look at as well when prepping trips is making sure all our maps and all our guides, etc., are up to date, and that's one of the big things we did with the high country. I actually got some of the latest versions from HEMA of the maps and made sure all my maps on my sat navigation unit were current as well, and the latest versions. One of the things Parks did pick up on when we sent them the route, one of the maps that we used was a little bit out of date, so we updated that.
Right, so looking at your vehicle, before you head off on that big trip, you'll want to make sure it's up to the task. If you've got a service coming up, you might want to think about bringing that forward and telling your mechanic what you're going to do. So he goes over from head to toe and doesn't just do the regular service intervals. Remember, your car out in the Australian outback is your lifeblood to the rest of the world. You don't want to get stuck because of something really simple and really silly that could have been fixed by just having a quick inspection. Okay, daily checks. Back when my old man was growing up, checking the oil was just something you did daily. These days, you just don't need to do it. Cars are so much more reliable and help is just a phone call away. But when you're out bush, it's a totally different story. A little problem can become a big, big problem very, very quickly. So we do a few simple daily checks just to make sure that we catch stuff before it happens. So here's a quick look at some of the checks we do each day. Right, so the first thing we'll check is the oil. Just making sure that there's plenty on the dipstick and it's not below the low point. Chuck the dipstick back in. Next up is the radiator. As you can see, ours is a little bit below the max line, so we're going to chuck a bit more fluid into that. So make sure you're using demineralized water, don't just use normal water or you'll need to drain and flush your whole radiator. So get that back up to the max line. And a quick check of your brake fluid to make sure that the levels are correct. And here we have our power steering fluid. Quick check of the levels to make sure that they're correct. And, put it all back together. And last but not least, you want to make sure that your wiper fluid's all topped up as well. Because where we go, there's a lot of dust and a lot of mud, and seeing out of the windscreen is often considered a bonus. It's worth sticking your head under the car as well, just to make sure that there's no leaks coming out of anywhere. Your engine, your transmission, just making sure that there's nothing caught up under there, and checking your diff as well. Alrighty, so you want to make sure that your tyres are running the correct pressure for the stuff that you're running during the day. And the last thing we do is make sure that everything's tied down properly. And that's it, daily checks, 5 minutes and you're done. One thing you need to check before you head off is to make sure your recovery kit is still in good condition. Now, without being a metallurgist, it's hard to tell whether a steel shackle is going to be 100% safe. But general rule of thumb, if it's a metal item and it still looks in pretty good nick, then it's probably going to be okay. Your soft stuff, your tow ropes, your snatch straps and your tree protectors, they're a lot easier to check. They should be nice and soft and subtle. And if they're starting to fray in any way at all, then it's time to replace. But if you do look after your snatch strap, keep it clean, wash it, then it should last you quite a long time. Another sign is if the snatch strap is starting to get stiff, that's another sign that it's maybe time to replace it. And up next, Andy tells us what he's got in store for Project Rangy.
G'day guys, Andy here. Just want to have a quick chat tonight before I load up the car with the new suspension components. So I've been deliberating for long and hard about this, and after a lot of backwards and forwards and reading and researching, I've ended up deciding to, rather than upgrading the air suspension I've got, is to change it out completely to coils and traditional shock absorbers and traditional coil springs. A couple of reasons for doing that. To upgrade the air suspension is a little bit laborious and a little bit complex and requires a lot of specialist tools. Also, we've got a lot of remote travel coming up over the next few months, and I really wanted something that was going to be kind of very, if you like, bulletproof. So what I've done in the end is I've gone with these DriveTech Enduro shocks. Apparently they're very good. I've had a lot of good reviews from them. DriveTech also do a lot of Land Rover gear, which is also quite good. And I've also decided to put some heavy duty King springs in there. Now both these components are actually for a Discovery 3. Discovery 3 and the Range Rover Sport share the same suspension components underneath. So hopefully, fingers crossed, tomorrow it should all go smoothly. I've already fitted the electronic suspension disarm module, which I got over from Dunlop, who actually make the air suspension on this. So they actually do a disarm module to actually fix all that or disable all that as well. So tomorrow morning, going off to the garage, and then we'll get it all fitted.
Great, thanks mate. And up next, I tell you why I love my Kumo AT51s. G'day guys, just doing a quick review on the Kumo AT51 tyres I put on my car around about 16,000 k ago. So just to be totally upfront and honest, I opened my wallet for these tyres. I paid cold hard cash myself, so this is not a sponsored segment. Just to give you a bit of history, my previous set of tyres were a set of BFG Goodrich AT tyres. I did about 160,000 Ks on 2 sets of those, including a lap of Australia. I was really impressed with their overall performance. One area I felt they let me down, which is probably the main reason I started shopping around to see what else was out there, was their on-road in wet performance. They were just a little bit slippery for me. Being a relatively new dad with a 4 and a 2-year-old, sort of safety's become my new #1 concern. So I read good things about the Kumos and thought that $100 a corner cheaper, why not have a crack? What's the worst thing that could go wrong? And I've got to say, so far, I'm really, really impressed. We spent 4 days at the end of last year up on Fraser Island. Dropped them straight down to 15 PSI, and they performed faultlessly for the entire weekend. Now, if you have a look at the tread pattern on the Kumos, they're a little bit more road biased. They're not quite as aggressive as other AT tyres out there on the market, so you'd certainly expect them to perform really well on the sand. And they did. I didn't have one tyre roll, didn't get bogged once. They just performed, really, really well. Second big test was our trip down at Fraser Island, trip down to the Victorian Highlands, High Country, keep getting that one wrong. Trip down to the Victorian High Country, 7 days down there. Was a little bit nervous as to how they were going to perform. Our guide, Pickle, was probably a little bit nervous as well. The other guys running a lot more aggressive AT tyres than what I had. A lot of water crossings, a lot of big shaly rocks, a lot of steep climbs, a lot of steep descents. And I've got to say, they were perfect. Not once did I feel like the tyres were letting me down, like I was slipping or sliding or not going to make anything because of the tyres on the car. They performed probably well above my expectations, considering the aggressive patterns that the other guys were running. So yeah, very impressed. So let's take them off and have a quick look. I've got a new one on the back that's been the spare, so we'll do a side-by-side comparison after 16,000 K. Right, so here we go. We've got the brand new AT51 here on your right, and the one that's currently running on the front right of the Patrol on your left. I've chosen the front right on the Patrol because, in my experience, I've typically found that that's the hardest wearing tyre on the car. So if you we'll have a quick look at tread depth on the new one, there's around about 10 mils there, according to my ruler. And then if we have a look at the one on your left, we've got around about 8 mils there. So they're not wearing too bad. That's 16,500 K, give or take. Now, I've been all over this tyre, and the worst thing that I can find is sort of a few little cuts like this one. There's a few little chunks missing sort of here and there. But apart from that, there's nothing major. There's no blocks, no whole blocks missing. So yeah, so I'm pretty, given the rocks and stuff that we hit in the Victorian high country, I'm pretty impressed with how these tyres have held up. So yeah, the litmus test. Would I recommend them to my old man? Absolutely. They have performed so well. The old man drives caravans around Australia these days. And I wouldn't hesitate to recommend them to him. So yeah, really impressed with the AT51s. Yeah, look, super impressed with the Kumo AT51s. If you spend a lot of time on the black stuff and still want a really capable off-road tyre, I'd recommend the AT51s all week long. Right, so the only thing worse than getting stuck in the bush is getting stuck in the bush without comms, without being able to ask for help. So Hawkey's taking a quick look at the comms that he takes when he goes out bush.
Folks, Hawkey here. One of the biggest questions I get about traveling remote is communications. Now, a lot of people underestimate the need to have a means of communication because they think it won't happen to them, nothing will go wrong, I'll be right. Someone will come by and help. Now, if you're a couple of k's from the road, stuck up to your wing mirrors in mud, nobody's coming. They don't know you're there. you can't get help without walking out. And if you've broken a leg, etc, 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 snake bite, roll over, there's so many situations where you need help and you need to be able to get attention. So what I have here is 4 of the tools I use when I'm out on the trail. I won't go deeply into the details of them, but what it is my first point of call, of course, is my phone. An iPhone gets a good signal. Telstra will get you a long way. You will get to a point where even Telstra won't have coverage. Now, at that point, I have 3 options available to me. I have a UHF radio, both in the car, and a handheld. Both are 80 channel, and both have the means to communicate around about 10 kilometers. So if you're near a road or anyone else, you should be able to get in contact with someone if they're there and if they have their radio on. Failing that, I have 2 more options. Now, if the car's rolled over, it's an absolute horrible mess and someone's going to die if you don't get attention quickly. A PLB is the way. If you have a spot tracker, you can send a signal saying either I'm okay, I need help, or emergency, get here right now. That will go to the authorities that need to hear it. The rescue helicopter will come. If you're not dying, if it's not dire, if you accidentally hit it, it's around about a $20,000 fine from what I understand. So it's not something to muck around with. In the situation where I'm not in a dire circumstance, I'm going to grab the satellite phone. It links into my iPhone. I can just pick it up and dial one of my contacts as normal and say, hey, can you get in contact with the local police station for me? I'm stuck at these coordinates. I have 2 days food. I can't move the vehicle. Nobody is hurt. Please send help. You can give them your satellite number. They can get back in touch with you. That's a really great option. Now, it costs a bit of money. Look into it. It's around about $700, plus you have to keep your number connected. However, that's my lifeline. It comes in the boat. It lives in the car. If I go hiking, that's coming. These are some options. There are hundreds of options out there. If you have any questions, feel free to email us.
Yeah, thanks Hawkeye. Communications when you're out in the bush, absolutely vital. Up next, not all batteries are the same, and let's take a quick look why. Right, so one of my favourite pieces of kit is my fridge, especially on those longer trips. It just changes the experience. But as soon as you start talking about fridges, you need to start having a conversation about batteries and power management. So you've essentially got 2 types of batteries. You've got your starting battery and you've got your deep cycle battery. And each battery does its own job really, really well. I've got 850 cold cranking amps here, which turns the 4.2 turbo diesel engine over absolutely effortlessly. But if I was to try and run my fridge off of that, it would dramatically reduce the lifespan of that battery, purely because it's not designed to have low current draw over a long period of time. It's designed to have a high output over a really, really short time. So we have a look at our deep cycle battery. Our deep cycle battery, while this one's only 100 amps, it's more than enough to run the fridge. So the fridge draws about 4.5 amps per hour in its duty cycle. And that battery will run that day in, day out, top it up with charge, and it'll just keep cycling through because that's what it's designed to do. If I was to try and start my car off of that battery, because the engine's so big, it might do the job. But if I was to try and do that on an ongoing basis, it would just destroy that battery. So, horses for courses. When you get a fridge or start having a higher electrical load on your car when you're camping and stopped, make sure you get a deep cycle battery with a battery management system in the back end to make sure that it's charged properly. Living life on the road. Hawkeye introduces us to his absolute favourite tool for cooking.
Folks, Hawkeye here up the Dampier Peninsula, just out of Broome, and Kim and I have come camping for a couple of days. So I brought with me the Bidgie Barbie, which is a very, very well-loved piece of kit, and this has done us for about the last 2 years around Australia. What it is, it's an Australian-made product, and it's based on the old ploughman's fry pan that the old settlers would have used. They got an old ploughing disc, welded some legs and a handle onto it, put it over the fire and used it as a fry pan. So this is the same thing, but it's compact, it packs down. It's one of those things that doesn't cost a lot of money, probably costs about 90 bucks, but you'll have it for decades and decades and probably give it to your kids. So the idea is it's just high enough, you put it over the coals, let it heat up, oil it up. You can cook however you like on it. It's basically a barbecue plate. So what we're going to do tonight, I'm going to cook up some crock patties that I have with some bacon, make up a sauce, make some burgers. Nothing too flash, but some nice food, and it's always better cooked over the coals, I reckon.
Right, first episode of In the Shed, done. Just before we go, I want to say a massive thanks to our gear sponsors, 230 for providing kit for testing, as well as prizes to give away to you guys. For Scrub Blades, we're doing some long-term testing on their windscreen wipers. We're up to about 8 months now. And also for Roller Roof Racks for supplying us with a Titan tray to test on Project Rangy. So until next time, guys, we'll see you out on the track.